Fill her up.
You're listening to the Gas Digital Network.
Good afternoon, Michael Malice here. Let that be your welcome for the next hour. We have with us someone who I have been extremely eager to speak with after the events of last week. Comedian Dave Smith, host of Part of the Problem, 1/3 of the Legion of Skanks, star of the Libertas comedy special, which hit #1. Dave, have you been, how much fun have you been having during all this on a scale of 1 to me?
Maybe about a 5. I mean, compared to you, if you're on the scale. I mean, it's entertaining, and it's just like, we've been blessed, and I say this in a very dark sense, but if in the last 3-4 years of just having these crazy historical moments that we're living through that are like kind of surreal.
Yeah.
But this one is really depressing. There's just so many horrible things happening over the last few days. So I'm enjoying the show of it all, but I've been sick to my stomach over some of the videos I've been watching.
Okay. What has been the stuff that's been most upsetting to you?
Well, I mean, I'll say first off, the Floyd, knee on the neck, video was sickening to me, to have a man in handcuffs on the ground and have your knee on his neck with this kind of like,
sir, I can't breathe, sir.
Yes. And there's something about the fact, Rob Bernstein said this the other day. He made a real good point about it. It's the first time I've ever heard him make a good point. So I really took notice. But he was like, sometimes when the cops even like accidentally shoot somebody, it'll still be kind of like, a split-second decision that was wrong. This wasn't that. This was a guy sitting there enjoying this moment as another human being, begging for his life, and ultimately dies. That was terrible. But since then, I think some videos I've seen have bothered me even more. I saw one particular video, which was upstate New York, where like 4 or 5 thugs are trying to vandalize this business, and an old lady and her husband come out to try to stop them, and they beat the shit out of both of them. I mean, just 4 thugs just beating the shit out of an old lady while her husband watches and is also getting beaten. It was one of the most disgusting things I've ever seen in my life, and I've seen some pretty horrible videos.
And also the guy in Dallas who was trying to defend his store with a sword, and they hit him in the head with a skateboard.
And then just mobs of people on top of him. Just really, it's, like humanity at its worst.
Yeah, but I've been focusing much more on how hopeful I am for the future. Listen, anytime you're going to have any kind of transition period, there's going to be some really very dark moments as a consequence. I mean, I hate, and I know you hate as well, the Disneyization of history. And like the founding fathers in the Revolutionary War, they were shooting the British. They weren't like playing, card games with them. Like, all right, governor, I'm off. I mean, they're shooting. The one famous story, I don't remember which battle this was. The premise was the British Army, and this used to work, was so feared and powerful. That's why they wore red, right? They wanted to stand out, because they would march and everyone would freak the fuck out and lay down their arms and kind of surrender, right? It was a smart move when you're that strong. We saw this happen in the first Gulf War, where we came in and everyone's like, I love George Bush, right? And what happened is they didn't adjust to new strategy. I guess they had new kind of guns that shot a long distance or whatever, but the Revolutionary boys were sitting in the hills and were just picking them off, and the British kept going. And we think about this story in terms of, this great moment, I guess, in American history. But if you think about what that would look like, it would be beyond horrifying. I mean, these gentlemen being murdered one after another, falling on piles, just horrible, horrible stuff. So my point is, what I am enjoying in all this is the complete, I think, unprecedented in my lifetime, a disparity between what we are seeing and what we are told we are seeing. That to me is, I have never seen it at this level. I have never seen it, and I had these tweets. I've been on a tear, as you know, I'm sure most of the listeners know, where it's 1 minute it's protesters, and then when CNN is targeted, they're rioters, and then the next day they're white supremacists and foreign actors. Yeah, Gerard Depardieu, he was in Minnesota, he was burning shit down. So the fact that, you know, you and I know that, you know, they take people starting in kindergarten and kind of train them to approach the truth in a certain way. And if you have years to build this foundation, you could get a lot accomplished. But if you have a story that's changing in real time and you can't really coordinate with your cronies to create a coherent narrative, you look like an ass.
Yeah. Well, that I agree that that's been the most entertaining part of all of this, has been this, as you said, like unprecedented collapse of a media narrative in real time. And it's really, it's like they've got this, you know, what was it we were talking about several episodes back, when you were like, you know, you had this theory about if all Republicans were to get in control of government, X, Y, and Z would happen. And then that happened and none of that came true. And you're like, okay, well, I got to abandon that theory.
Yeah.
And you see these guys who just like will not abandon their theory.
Right.
And they're working so hard to force these contradictory facts into their theory. So was it white nationalists? Maybe that'll make this work somehow. And it's entertaining to watch.
Who was the guy? Seth Abramson, I think is his name. He's the one who wrote Proof of Collusion, whatever the guy's name is. He had this tweet. It was a masterpiece where I couldn't have written it myself, where he goes, I don't know what's going on here. None of us do. But I wouldn't be surprised if Trump and white nationalists had some part to play in blah, blah, blah.
Right.
And it's just like, yeah, we know you wouldn't be surprised.
Yeah, you wouldn't be surprised, of course.
It's like, I have no data, but my usual boogeyman is a prime suspect. Yeah, that's what boogeyman means.
And this is like the effect of the Trump presidency on the Democrats, the media, and kind of progressives in general. I remember one specifically, this guy who's a comic, Dean Abidallah, who works for CNN or something. And he said after, if you remember the Iowa presidential primary where they had all those problems and they couldn't declare a winner and the app failed and all that. And he said, now there's no concrete proof that this was Russian interference, but I understand why people would assume it, because the Russians do hate Democrats and democracy. So, I mean, and it's like, wow, dude, no, like there's no proof. That's an understatement. There's not a shred of evidence or any indication to even entertain this thought. But isn't that a great, you know, it's like, it's worse than anything Alex Jones has ever said. There isn't proof, but it's reasonable to suspect that lizard people are actually controlling Hillary Clinton's brain. Like, why?
If he was smart, he would know it was the Fed.
Right. Yeah. Right. Really.
What an idiot. It's clearly the Fed.
But the thing I actually think what is most shocking and of the media narrative on this, or the absence in the media narrative on this, because a lot of times, you know, Americans, we have short memory spans, and this is true more so than ever, I think. You know, like even when the Michael Flynn stuff is coming out, it's like, what? This is 2017. Like, who cares about what happened then? You know, we're in the future now. But I'm sorry, the COVID thing is not that long ago and still kind of going on. And to remember way back when, 3 weeks ago, when they had a protest in Michigan, and this huge concern from the corporate press was, oh my God, this is going to spread COVID around everywhere. And to see that completely evaporate from the conversation is stunning. And not to say, and I've seen the justification where, you know, the Joyanne Reeds of the world will say, well, this protest is legitimate. You know, that one was just about getting haircuts, but this is about a murdered man. Now, forget even whether you think this protest is legitimate or that one, all of that aside, if the COVID thing's a threat, when a few dozen people protest outside a Capitol building, how are tens of thousands of people in cities all across America just looting and rioting together? How would this not be a bigger threat for the worst pandemic ever? And how does that not come into the story somehow? And that's Another great red pill moment.
Yeah, it's really kind of funny because the way they vacillate, just minute by minute. Amy Klobuchar had this talk, and she was saying, "Oh, we're finding out that these people are coming from out of state." Like, where? Like, is the demographics of Michigan that different from Minnesota? Like,
Right.
where are these like Martians teleporting from that are destroying your state? And especially because here's the other thing. This is another way of that how despicable the cathedral is. They've trained Americans for a very long time to not have any nuance in their thinking, right? Everything's binary. It's either the good guys or the bad guys, and we're the good guys and they're the bad guys. And you have these protests, and a lot of these Black Lives Matter people might not like them. They're not about looting. They are about, all right, we're going to march, we're going to make a scene, we're going to make noise, because when you sit at home and make Facebook updates, no one gives a crap about what we have to say. But when we're in everyone's face, people get upset. But then you all know the name Black Lives Matter, don't you? You don't know the name of Duncan Lemp. No one knows about him because no one's pitching a fit about him. And then you have looters, and they look alike, and it takes a little bit of nuance to be like, wait a minute, just because they look alike and they may have the same concerns, these are not people acting in the same part of the brain. These are not people with the same goal. But because the cathedral has trained people to be binary in their thinking, so many right of center people are going to be like, oh, it's all the same. It's just Black people. And it's amazing.
That might just be a human tendency to some degree, because this happens all the time, and this is what we're always battling against. It's this kind of collectivist, monolithic thinking. Lou Rockwell wrote this really great piece at the beginning of the whole COVID thing, where he was talking about how China is not your enemy. And he was like, the Chinese people are not your enemy. And talking about how the Chinese, there were these Chinese doctors who tried to blow the whistle on this whole thing, and they were silenced by the Chinese government. Human beings tend to just think of it as China. Like, that's the whole, it's them. And this is how wars, get started. And this is why people like me and you oppose wars in general. Because there's innocent people who get caught up in this, who had nothing to do with it. Even if a leader did something wrong, that doesn't mean the army he's conscripted, let alone the women and children and innocent, people in some village somewhere. Like, it's not okay to just, so in the same sense, that plays on both sides of this. Number one, that person looting doesn't represent everybody. On the other hand, you can also apply this to the idea of looting and destruction of property and rioting. Like, these are business owners. These are people who had nothing to do with this cop killing this poor guy. And so, and it's just, there's a lot of disgusting behavior around. I'm less optimistic than you are. I actually think that it's like, I think if you look at the video of the cop with his knee on this guy's neck, that the general reaction from average reasonable people is like, the cops are out of control. This is a really big problem.
Went on a tear about this, and she said murder, and she says it's systemic.
Yes.
If Meghan McCain is saying these words, that means a lot to me.
Well, she's a little radical for me, but I prefer the more of the
John
type.
Yeah, John McCain, not his crazy daughter.
Megan goes off on these rants, systemic. I don't know.
What does that mean?
No, but right. So people looked at that video. I think the gut reaction, even from right wingers, around the country, was like, "This is horrific. This guy should be charged." I've heard. I know, like my Trump supporting father-in-law. He was pissed off that all the cops weren't charged.
Yeah.
He was like, every one of them should have been put in handcuffs and charged on television when it happened. That's that. They're all an accessory to murder,
Hey, here, let me just interrupt you, because it's very easy. I can't breathe. Here's what you do. The guy's clearly not flipping his shit. He's not Flavor Flav, some kind of like hood rat. You say to him, here's what's going to happen. I'm going to take my knee off your neck. I'm going to draw on you. Do not move, and make sure I can see your hands at all times. And I have my partners for backup. Do you understand what I'm saying? Yes, sir. Done.
And he's on the ground in cuffs with 4 cops surrounding him. He was neutralized. There was no reason for any of this to happen. That being said, I think those same reasonable people who were looking at that, now they're looking at riots and looting and people burning down large areas of cities, and they go, well, you know what? We need the cops. Right. We need the cops. They feel more that now the message is like, oh man, if it wasn't for the cops, that's all that's between us and this. And I remember literally what kept popping into my head was this line that you said the first time I ever met you. was at the Hamilton debate
Yeah.
versus Tom Woods. And in defending Hamilton, you said, and I remember this really stuck with me, that you said what Hamilton understood was that the number one enemy to liberty and civilization is the mob. And that always stuck to me, because in my mind, I was always kind of like, well, the state is the enemy of liberty. But you realize there are actually these kind of two equal enemies of liberty. And one is the mob. And when people see the mob, they will prefer the state to the mob, because at least the state offers order. Okay, neither might offer liberty, but at least the state offers order, which is better than a lack of order and a lack of liberty. So I think that the result of this is going to be people siding with the cops.
Hey guys, Michael Malice here. I want to tell you about one of my favorite sponsors, which is Sheath Underwear, SHEATH. If you go to sheathunderwear.com and use code Malice20, you get 20% off. What is Sheath Underwear? It's invented by a soldier while serving in Iraq, where things can get a little hot down there. And he used Kickstarter to launch Sheath. I got my start in Kickstarter too. It's like an inverted kangaroo pouch for your Joey that keeps your junk from sliding to your legs. What does that mean? It's got a pouch for your one part, a pouch for your other part. It's the most comfortable underwear, and I wear it exclusively now because I am such a fan of the brand. They also have an amazing line of underwear for women, but as we all know, women are not allowed to listen to the show by law. Here's how it works. 100% money back guarantee off your first pair. Support our sponsors because they keep the show going, and I wear this product. You can get in my underwear, people. That's right. Finally, someone will. If you go to sheathunderwear.com and use promo code Malice20, you get 20% off your order. You are welcome. Let's talk about disgusting behavior.
Sure.
I didn't even bother looking at some of the neocon takes. Some people tweet at me that they're just as horrific as you expect. And it's just really amazing to me because if you look at all the carnage that's happened in the past week, which has not been very nice, in terms of property damage and lives lost, it is nothing compared to any of their fucking wars. Talk about innocent people. I mean, I think 3 people have died. Let's suppose it's 50. That's not cool. That's not funny. That's horrible. How many people died in Iraq? How many innocent civilians died? For even in the military. Let's pretend it's acceptable to kill military as much as we want. Let's pretend. How many innocent people died in Iraq? I will never forget this. I brought this up with you before. This is one of those moments that really stuck with me, and really, I'm like, holy shit, I'm seeing the face of evil. It's really rare when we see like true evil. There was a guy on CNN, I think it was, he was a military dude. He wasn't in fatigues. He was maybe in a suit. And he was talking about shock and awe. And he had this big smile in his face about how awesome it was going to be. And he said, if you have to ask, it's not shock and awe, right? And he was talking about it like he's selling you a car. Like it was that corporate kind of salesman, like Glad Handy, Dale Carnegie kind of way. And I'm sitting there and I'm thinking, you don't just shock and awe Saddam. When you're shocking and awing Baghdad, which is a metropolis, you are shocking and awing millions of people. Let's pretend 70% of them are evil, right? Let's just pretend. For you to be like, well, 30% of millions of people are going to be in absolute terror. And that's a guarantee. If you don't get it, you're going to get your money back. And I'm just sitting there and I'm like, you have totally disconnected what you're advocating for with what that means in practice. Yeah. And you're so proud of this new model weaponry when the purpose by your own name is we promise it will terrify the population. Yeah. So it's amazing how, go ahead.
No, and the reaction to it, like what you were saying was the look on the guy's face. Tom Woods, our mutual friend, very failed podcaster, what turned him anti-war was after the first Persian Gulf War, when he was reading these reports of soldiers being, incinerated as they were trying to surrender on the battlefield. And he was like, and the reaction of this is we're having like a Bob Hope special to celebrate the victory in the war. And he's like, now I understand that they're supposed to be my enemy, but he's like, these are like 17-year-olds who were conscripted by Saddam Hussein. And I'm a Christian. And even if it was absolutely necessary to do this, the idea that we'd be having a Bob Hope special and like kind of celebrate, I remember when
Wait, hold on.
George.
But what about the idea that you're just going to join the army because you're being invaded by a foreign force?
Sure. There's that too. But even if it were, and I don't know what the scenario would be, but even if it were absolutely necessary to go start dropping bombs on civilians, like let's say you could come up with some scenario
Sure.
where this was just the better of two awful options. After you were done dropping those bombs, you would think it would be a somber, sober moment where you went, we were faced with an awful choice and we had to do this terrible thing. It's over now. Let's do everything we can to make sure we don't have to do that again. But you see George W. Bush, coming back, mission accomplished, and landing the plane and kind of like celebrating. And everyone mocks that moment because he didn't actually win the war. And we're still in that war today. But forget that. What if we had won the war? How is that any way to react to innocent men, women, and children being slaughtered? There's something so sick about spiking the football after a murder campaign. But right, so the idea of neocons, I mean, when they ever, and they love to do it more than any, get up on their high horse and start preaching to everybody else about morals and who's racist and who's wrong, and those people, they should be lined up against a wall, man.
Ooh, strong words.
No, just to measure height. Just to see who's.
They're all going to be shorter than me. Well, let's talk about this, because one of the reasons I am hopeful about this is first of all, I tweeted this out, and binary thinkers couldn't wrap their heads around it. I tweeted out Sunday. I said, Antifa and Black Lives Matter are about to go to war with each other. And people are like, oh no, they're the same thing. I'm like, I'm sorry. Is there any bigger demographic disparity than like rich, or not even rich, whatever, college educated white kids and ghetto blacks? Like, yeah, they're both going to vote Democrat. They're both going to be upset about the same thing. But sociologically, these are not the same thing.
Are they ghetto blacks, though, Black Lives Matter? I think a lot of them are college-educated black kids who are really leading that stuff. I do agree with you that they're different groups and that they don't have the same goals in mind.
My point is that the bulk of Black Lives Matter are not going to be college-educated. They're not even going to be ghetto. But the point is,
the leaders
sure,
probably are. But yeah, you're okay. I get what.
But they're not college-educated in the same way that the Antifa people are. They're not actually looking for, we want to destroy this country and burn shit down for the sake of burning shit down. If you saw Killer Mike's talk, if you see a lot of what they're saying, they are very focused on keep it safe. This is going to reflect bad on us. What are you doing? Blah, blah, blah. They have been doing a great job despite what people would perceive otherwise, because they're very easily in a position to make this a lot worse. Very easily. And the ones who are interested in making this a lot worse are Antifa. But
yes,
binary thinkers can't wrap their heads around this. I am also interested to hear your thoughts. It's very interesting to me that the two people who would probably do the best job of shutting this shit down are Barack Obama and Bill Clinton. If they got in front of the cameras and gave one of their little speeches, a lot of people would listen, and that would change the dynamic. And they're sitting on their fucking hands.
Yeah, I haven't even thought about that, but that's a really excellent point. And particularly Barack Obama, because nobody's got juice like him.
Yeah,
he's the first black president in this country, and he really should, because one of the tragedies, one of the many tragedies of all of this stuff is that it's their own neighborhoods that they end up destroying the vast majority of the time. This always falls disproportionately on small businesses, on working class people, on the poor. That's who suffers from all of this. And on top of that, I think that one of the reasons why I'm not as optimistic as you, and I hope that Black Lives Matter and Antifa do end up really clashing. I think there are already some signs of that happening.
There was this video, which I'm sure you probably saw. There was like a college professor. The person had gray hair, and they were trying to like break shit. And the black people just grabbed him and took him to the cops.
Yeah, no, that was beautiful. That was great to see. But I think overall, this is having. I think that this is just exacerbating racial tensions in America right now. I think that the truth is, and the thing that's so ironic about it is that this is less of a racial issue than it is
Yes.
a state brutality issue.
The cops were diverse. The cops
yes.
around George Floyd were very diverse.
The cops were diverse. It makes no difference if what color the cops are. They're still going to treat you the same way. And it doesn't really make much of a difference what color the victim in this situation is. I mean, obviously, we did a podcast about Duncan Lemp. You've been doing a bunch of shows about raising awareness about that. There's, it happens. This happens twice as often to white people as it does to black people. Now, disproportionality aside, not to say that doesn't matter,
Sure.
but there's different theories on what the reasons are. I mentioned this the other day, and I loved it. Me and you talked about this a couple months ago on an unrelated subject, but I've never heard anybody except us actually talk about this. Not to say I haven't heard it though. Where you could say, like, you have kind of one side who's saying, well, the reason black people are disproportionately targeted by the cops is because they commit a disproportionate amount of the crime. And then you have like the left-wing people who will say, well, no, the crime stats are inflated because they're disproportionate or something like that. And you're like, all of this can be true. Like it's not one or the other. There is a real violent crime problem in the black community. And that doesn't also mean that then cops look at a black guy and are more likely to assume he is a violent criminal. And that's still unfair to the black guy who's not a violent criminal, that he gets put into this category. All of these things can be true at the same time. But regardless of all of that, this happens twice as much to white people. The proportionalities are not equal, but something that happens twice as much, you would think you would hear about a little bit. Yes. But you really don't, because the media loves picking up the narrative of something that's going to inflame racial tensions. It's a divide and conquer strategy. And if you really heard about Duncan Lemp and that guy in his basketball shorts on his knees who gets murdered, I'm blanking on his name right now. He was in Arizona, I believe. Yeah. With these things, then you realize, oh, hey, we're kind of all in this together against the state. But instead, it's seen as this racial issue, and then it just kind of divides people more. And now, on the same token, when you see people, destroying businesses, beating people up, all of these things, and then they're being treated with kid gloves in the media, and it does seem like to me like you're just not allowed to ever blame black people.
Right. So that's part of the civil rights movement. Like, it's a heresy for them. You can never say black people did anything bad.
But also that the MSNBCs and CNNs of the world, they can never say, and it's like, okay, you don't have to blame all black people, but it has to be the narrative that's okay is Antifa's coming in and doing this. Outside agitators are coming in and doing this. White supremacists, or if it's pinned down on black people, then it's the old, a riot is the powerless, voiceless people expressing themselves. But you can never just be like, no, I'm sorry. These people are acting like savages and they need to do better than that. The black people peacefully protesting, excellent. Do your fucking thing. You have every right to be protesting this shit. But the black people who are just destroying fucking people's property, beating people up, you're fucking anti-civilized, animals, and you need to be dealt with.
I disagree. I think this is going to make racial relations better. And I'm saying this because of my work with D.L. Hughley. I think a large part of there's a lot of people who are convinced that that racial issues cannot ever be made better. And, they're different and we can never, the binary thinking, right? It's either going to be terrible or wonderful. And since it can't be wonderful, it's got to be terrible. I'm saying it can get better. Let's put that as a hypothesis. One of the sources of frustration in the black community has been historically that they complain about police brutality. And you see a lot of white people, maybe from rural areas who don't have to experience this, look at them being like, you know what you're talking about. You guys are always complaining. You want handouts. This is bullshit. We're sick of your complaining, blah, blah, blah. And then now, though, when you see this video, and I've seen very little defense of this officer, very little. And to have conservatives and white people be like, okay, you're right. I think that is one possibility where things will get better. I think the fact that the media is, I think some people, everything's marginal. Some people are very clearly seeing a distinction between what the media is saying and what Black Lives Matter is saying. Black Lives Matter isn't saying this is white supremacists. They're being very explicit and but clear. And when you have someone, the Seattle mayor, she was tweeting out, we have to make clear that white men are responsible for some of this. When you hear that, some people, they're not going to think, oh, this is a black people thing. They'll be like, no, this bitch is a horrible person and she's the villain. And I think the more that people, this is of course my pet issue, but the more that people understand how evil the corporate press is, the better the possibility of us having some kind of reconciliation and actual dialogue. And I think a lot of people, here's the best example of this. I think a lot of people, even a lot of racists, right? When they sit down and see CNN getting raided and looted and stormed, and they're like, oh, okay, like this, okay, something's not adding up with the narrative I've been told. Because I've been told CNN is good, Black Lives Matter is good, Antifa, well, they don't really exist. You know, they're all the same. And I'm like, wait a minute, they're not that good, because they're clearly they're not friends with CNN. So something's not adding up here. So I think that is a possibility for positive change. I think conservatives, conservatives are very big. Someone had this great tweet. They go, their favorite EXE from conservative NPCs is when they make up races to prove that they're not racist. Oh, I don't care if someone's purple, green, orange, or whatever. I'm like, you know what? If I saw someone who was purple, I'd care. I'd be very interested in finding out what the hell is going on here, right? But I think the conservatives who are so focused on their anti-racist bona fides are going to be very quick to share these videos like those Black Lives Matter activists turning over Antifa to demonstrate, look, I'm not racist. Let's look at this in a more nuanced way. So I think that's another venue for positivity. And I'm going to point something else out. There's people who think, oh, they're going to riot. Those people, they riot at the drop of a hat. They didn't riot after George Zimmerman got acquitted. And frankly, in some senses, that would make more sense to riot than this.
There was some looting and stuff, but it was nothing on this level.
And nothing like expected. Everyone was like, all right, here we go. It's going to be America on fire. It wasn't like that.
This is the worst in my lifetime of these type of riots, and even worse than the LA riots, because they're not as contained. I mean, it's spreading out. Yeah, it's spreading out. I mean, this is 6 or 7 cities now that this stuff has been going on, and so this is a whole different thing. I just, I hope you're right. I just kind of look at it and think, I think that the big winners from all of this were the police state. And I think that especially with this whole COVID thing, we were really on the verge of right-wingers being red-pilled on police.
They were.
I saw that. I saw a huge trend in that direction. But now that you have these mobs in all of these major cities, what I'm seeing is a lot more right-wingers going the Donald Trump route, where he says that they start looting, we start shooting. And that's that. We got to put down the mob. And I got to say, I understand where they're coming from.
Oh, of course.
I'm no friend of the cops, but I completely understand. By the way, I think Donald Trump, that was an example of his genius. I cannot believe that the corporate press still hasn't figured out not to take the bait. Donald Trump's standard move, this is what he does over and over again, is he picks a popular issue and then says something outrageous on the side of the popular issue, an exaggeration, something that's a little bit more than true. And the corporate press cannot help themselves but to take the bait and go, he said this thing that's outrageous and untrue. And then they position themselves against the popular issue that Trump is now for. So Trump says they start looting, we start shooting. They're like, oh my God, he wants to shoot people. He wants to give out death sentence for shoplifting or whatever, blah, blah. And now Trump has positioned himself against the looting, and they've positioned themselves making excuses for it. And I think that's a big win for him.
Hey guys, I want to tell you about Ridge, which is a really cool wallet. You guys know I'm a bit of a hipster, so I think it's important to look as unique as possible. Ridge is a sleek wallet. It's got 2 metal plates bound together with an elastic band and looks nothing like a regular wallet. Take that Costanza wallet, throw it in the trash. They've got titanium, carbon fiber, aluminum. All you have to do, if you go to ridge.com, you can check them out. And if you go to use code Malice, you get 10% off and free shipping and free returns. How can you go wrong with that? It's a lifetime warranty if you love it and free returns if you don't. It looks like nothing you have seen, and it'll help you get rid of all the garbage that's in your wallet. You take it out at a job interview. You take it out on a date. Oh, what's that? Oh, this old thing? It's Ridge. You probably haven't heard of it. But if you went to ridge.com/malice and use code Malice, you get 10% off your order, and they'll mail it to you for free. And then you'll be calling me and saying, you are welcome. And I'll be saying, how'd you get my number? Let's get back to the show. Here's another big win for him. If he did send in the tanks, They would be calling him, look, it's Hitler, and not unreasonably, right? So the fact that he's sitting on his hands and keeping his mouth shut relatively, I think is very smart in his part, because now they're trying to freak out and trying to pin it on him. And he's like, I'm not saying shit. So I think that is very smart in his part. I think it'd be very funny if Joe Biden tries to twist. If Joe Biden was brilliant, he would turn this on Trump and say, look, this is your criminal reform bill. Like, I had the crime bill, I put these people away and you freed them. And this is what happens. That would be such a smart move, which he would never, ever do.
That'd be the ultimate heel turn.
Wouldn't that be the greatest thing ever? Like, yeah. I'm also, I tweeted at Lewis, he didn't reply, because part of Lewis's stand-up act is when it's good being Puerto Rican, because when the race war starts, we can sit on the sides and then just pick the winner. And I'm like, Lewis, which one's it going to be? he didn't have an answer for me. I disagree with you about the conservatives. I think, for example, I just tweeted this just now. There was some cop, I forget where, a police chief, and she's saying, we're not going to go in there and protect property in a building when there's no people. So it's like they're explicitly saying we're not doing our job, like we're told. Let's talk some more positive things about the cop. Bradley Balco, who you and I are both big fans of, he had a tweet this morning about, he's been covering protests for a long time. He wrote them about in his first book. He's never seen cops targeting journalists like this. Something has changed. And there's been a lot of footage where these just horrible, worst people genuinely believe that if there's like a curfew or like a war zone, they could go in there, say the word press, and then everyone's gonna be like, oh, cool, cool, cool. You want some picnic, or you want some sandwiches? As if like all they would have to do is just have t-shirts that say Black Lives Media. And everyone's like, oh, okay, go wherever you want. This is a free country. Like the level of delusion is absolutely hilarious. So there are two scenarios are, one is the cops were told, look, you got to lock this shit down. Like no exceptions. You don't have time to be like, hey, yes, duck, duck, goose. Everyone has to get off the streets, which is reasonable. The other scenario is they've got something big planned if shit gets even worse, and they're getting ready to get the cameras off the streets, so no one has footage of it. So what's your thoughts on that?
I agree with you that it's entertaining to watch the press's kind of false sense of security and superiority being shattered. And in terms of what they have planned, I'd be shocked if they don't have something big planned. I mean, when you start, when riots start going to this level, when you start taking it right up to the White House, when you start going through, there's a lot of fairly affluent areas. I mean, Soho was just being trashed the other day, and this is already in a devastated economy. I would be shocked if there weren't some plans for something big going on. So I don't know. It's definitely something to keep an eye on.
You think we're going to be in the FEMA camps?
Alex Jones has been right about a lot of other shit. There were really interdimensional beings running this thing the whole time. So maybe he's right about the FEMA camps too. I don't know. How has your perception of this changed over the days that it's been unfolding? Well, I guess that I was, as always, I started off being outraged by the police, which I've been outraged by the police state for, I've been publicly speaking about it for a decade at this point. And I absolutely am, I'm no fan of cops. And I'm really no fan of police in America in current day. But I have been really disgusted at the refusal or inability to directly call out the savage behavior that I've seen from the looters and the rioters. And I it's really strange to me. It seems like this I guess a version of like the soft bigotry of Low Expectations or something like that. But even when it's like everything except calling out what you see on a video, like everything. Well, there were piles of bricks out there. And by the way, that's an interesting story.
Yeah.
Like, okay, what's going on with these piles of bricks? I'd like to get down to the bottom of that. But that's also not an excuse for somebody to start throwing bricks at people. Like what type of fucking, racism is that? It's like almost this thing where they're like, well, I mean, they're very upset and they had a brick, so you can't help but expect these animals to start launching them at people. It's like,
that's like
no, I can.
That's like the lefty thing where it's like, well, he got called the N-word. What do you want him to do? Not punch someone in the face? I'm like, yeah, that's the one.
Yes, that's right.
That what you just said, yeah.
And I'm sorry, but like, you know, there's this weird fucking defense. I actually spoke to a friend of mine, this woman who's like she's like a liberal. And she was even saying, you know, she was like, oh my God, these horrible videos of the cops like shoving this woman down on the street. And I was like, yeah, that's absolutely horrible. Have you seen the videos of these guys, you know, these thugs beating the shit out of like these people, like stomping them on the ground, beating up an old woman? And she goes, yeah, but the vast majority of them aren't doing that. And I go, did you just give me the few bad apples?
Did you see that tweet of mine?
No.
I said, you can't judge all these looters by a few bad apples.
Right. Now, okay, so that's a great call. And you can call out both sides on that hypocrisy, right? But okay, like, let's be consistent here. Like, no, you're not going to use the excuse that the cops have just been using, and the cops can't use can't pin you with the defense they've been using. But to me, it's like, no, I don't know what to say. Like, how can you not, in the same sense that you go, if somebody were to tell you, oh, they're very angry or they're very upset, it's like, okay, was bombing Iraq okay because we were very upset about 9/11 because we were traumatized? No, because they didn't do that. That's not on them. Okay. So in the same sense, going and just fucking like, you know, destroying a fucking business is not okay. They did not do that. They didn't put their knee on anyone. And then you get these fucking ridiculous, the left wing, you know, oh, so you care more about property than you care about, you know, lives or something like that. It's like, no, what type of false choice is that? What type of ridiculous binary? It's like if somebody like fucking, you know, murdered a friend of yours, and then you just went over to your neighbor who had nothing to do with it and kicked him in the face. And I was like, whoa, dude, you can't do that. And you're like, oh, so you care about getting kicked in the face more than you care about murder? It's like, no, they're both wrong, but this person wasn't responsible. You don't get to just destroy people's things. And then there's also the lefty economics that come into it all, where they're like, oh, insurance will pay for that, or, you know, it'll create more jobs to clean it up or something like that, which is all just, you know,
sure, insanity. Yeah, sure, a lot of broken windows going around.
Well, yeah, I mean, I guess, well, shouldn't like Paul Krugman be like, oh, this is exactly what we needed in this bad economy, get everything humming again?
Oh my God. So how would you like to see this resolved, and how do you see it realistically playing out?
Okay, how I would like to see it resolved would be that there's got to be more of an effort, which there has been some already, but there has to be more of an effort from the Black Lives Matter protester side to really forcefully condemn the Antifa, the looters, the rioters. And again, not saying there hasn't been any of that, but not enough. They should make that their primary goal, not even their secondary. Stop with the excuse making. Stop with the, well, people are angry and this murder was horrible. Forget about that. Understand that right now, your worst enemy are the people looting and rioting. They're your worst enemy. They're a worse enemy than the cops are. Okay? They're sabotaging your whole moment where you could win over the country. Yeah. You actually could win everyone over and have a real moment of change here. And they're sabotaging that. So come out forcefully. No excuses. You're our enemy, and differentiate yourself largely. And then, you know, I'd like to see reforms in policing. I mean, like, once and for all, we got to just say that it is unacceptable to ever bring this type of violence to someone who's not a violent criminal.
Yes.
That's it. It can't be done. I'm sorry. If someone's selling Lucy cigarettes or someone's given a fake $20 bill, we as a society, I mean, me and you are having a conversation in different states right now. We have a lot of, you know, we've come a long way as a society. We can figure out a different way to regulate these petty, irrelevant
I just
offenses.
Had that tweet. I said, even if Eric Gardner had merely been arrested, it was still an abomination.
Yes. Don't kidnap a man and throw him in a cage for the
selling
crime
cigarettes.
Of selling Lucy. And I said this, and I said this the other day when I was talking to Robbie, and I'll say it again here, that, you know, I get a lot of the right leaning people who kind of have this attitude of like, hey, you don't want to get a knee on your neck, don't resist arrest. You don't want to do this, don't commit the crime. It's like, okay, you want to live in that slave mentality, don't have an AR-15. That's the new rule that they just came up with. Oh, when it's your freedom, that's not okay, right? But what about the freedom to sell a Lucy cigarette? Why do you get your gun and not his? Oh,
which is more dangerous, right? Yeah, which is more of a threat to society.
Well, right. You don't want to get kicked off Twitter? Don't be right wing. You don't want, I mean, if you want to just, if you want to just play this game, this slave bitch mentality to the authority, then okay. But guess what, by the way, if you're a right winger who's like, well, those are the rules, that's the authority. Guess what? The left owns the fucking culture. So don't be so quick to jump onto that, fucking authoritarian model. It's like, no, let's think about what's right here. What's more realistically going to happen, I think, is that I think the riots will hopefully fade out over the next few days. I think tons of people who went out there's lives are going to be fucking ruined. They're going to find videos and evidence. I think a lot of people throw a brick through a window, throw something and think like, oh, they got away with it. It's like, you better have been wearing a mask, man, because don't think you can't be prosecuted for this shit down the line. And some of those people burning cop cars and shit like that, that's going to carry a crazy sentence along with it. And I think that it's going to open up the door for Trump to run on a real law and order message.
Yeah, that's how Nixon got elected in 68, was over this stuff. And it's also, after Ferguson, the Republicans had huge wins in Congress that year, and they don't like to, the cathedral doesn't like to put two and two together with those regards. But I talk about this in my book. You don't have to know anything about politics. If you have one group of people that's for fire and the other group that's against fire, even an animal is going to be like, I don't like fire. I want the not fire party.
Yeah. So that, and I'll tell you this, that it brings out my inner Randian to fucking see this stuff happening where you're just kind of like, no, I'm sorry. Civilization is built by great men, and you don't get to just come tear it down and then expect the rest of us to clean it back up for you. I'm sorry. Like you want to be a fucking animal, then you don't have to be a part of civilization. And it triggers that in me for sure.
I just sent out a tweet before we started taping, which I'm scared to look at my notifications. This is one of those rare tweets where I warn everyone it's a troll. I said, watch out, my next tweet's going to be a nuke. And I just tweeted out, let's be honest. If George Floyd had just obeyed the law, none of this would be happening. I'm like, all right, now let's record it, Dave. So it was good knowing you.
Oh, you're gonna have fun.
Yeah. I think it's interesting. I feel an obligation to try to be as positive and hopeful as possible. And it's actually easy for me because that is my view. And I think a lot of people, those of us who love freedom and hate the state, it's very easy to get discouraged, right? So is that something that you feel, or are you just be like, I'm just going to call it like I see it and shit's going down and it's bad?
I probably lean more toward, I'm just going to call it like I see it. But I think that your perspective is not without its merit. And I think that it's something that all of us radicals have to try our best to keep in our mind. I mean, there's people, like I used to say this about Christopher Cantwell, where I'd always, people would be like, why do you seem to have this like kind of sympathetic tone towards someone, especially someone who said such horrible things about Jews and your families, survived the Holocaust and stuff like that. And, it's like the thing about, it's like your line about taking a red pill and not taking the whole bottle. The thing about being red pilled is that you deal with some shit that is like, this is really worth dying over. Yeah. Like, this is something where it's like, I maybe should be out in the street, like, doing something about that. I mean, if just the most basic red pill shit, if that they lied us into wars and it's like, you'll murder children for profit. I mean, like, this is worth dying. Or not even for profit, over.
Just for power.
Yeah. Or right. Whatever type of profit in a sense,
Yeah.
And you have to find a way, if you're going to be, a happy person or have any type of normal life or just not go crazy, you have to find a way to grapple with that and swallow it and go, okay, yes, this is worth dying over, but I don't choose to go die right now. And so it's not a bad idea to have your outlook of trying to stay positive and seeing the benefits of.
But I'm also going to say something else, which I know you agree with, and I know you and I both live this value, which is even if America's going to shit and we're ruined, that doesn't mean on a personal level my life has to go to shit and I have to be ruined. That is so important. You're not, it's like Trump derangement syndrome, right? It's like these people think, well, if Trump is the president, there's no way I can be happy. What? Like how? That makes no sense, right? So same thing. It's like, well, America's ruined, demographic displacement. It's give it up, folks. Okay, let's pretend that's all true. Does that mean you're ruined? Does that mean your family is destroyed? No, it doesn't at all.
I mean, I remember seeing some blue check mark. I can't remember who it is, but they said it was like a year and a half ago. And they said, I was crying last night over how much I miss Barack Obama as our president.
Bitch. Keep
and
crying,
I was
bitch.
like, yeah, like what is going on in your life? Like, do you have like a girlfriend or a friend or maybe a Netflix account? Like, do you have anything in your life that you're actually crying over the last president not being president anymore? It's like, this is not your entire life, and it really shouldn't be.
Right. We're running out of time. What has been your favorite part of this episode?
Well, I'll tell you, I over this whole pandemic thing, I got hooked on Michael Malice and conversations with the guy, and then we went like a week without one, and I've been itching and like really just fiending for a fix. Like, oh my God, I need some Malice, and so I got my fix today. So that's the whole thing is my favorite part.
You are welcome.